Show of hands, who ever had the bright idea growing up to run away? Okay. Oh, man. All right. So half the church. Half the church. That's fine. So, just so you know now, you're not alone, right? When I was young, okay, I got in trouble for this last week. I'm young. You guys can see it. When I was younger, I don't even, to be honest with you, I don't remember what it was that made me so frustrated that I said in my mind, I need to leave. But I do know that it wasn't justified. I was overreacting, being melodramatic, sure. But in my mind, I said, I've had enough. Nobody respects me around here. I'm getting out. And so, I had seen in like TV shows, movies, cartoons, when people run away, they get the little bag and a stick, right? And then they throw it over their shoulder. And so I thought that was law, right? Like to run away, you have to have the stick and the bag, and you fill the bag with stuff. So in my young mind, so I was like, well, I'm going to need to eat something. I'm sure I'll find water fountains and things like that, so I don't need to pack any of that. But I will need to eat because I don't have any money. I'm 5. So what I did is I went into the cupboards, and my mom had these, you guys know what they are, the meal replacement, the Slim Fast bars. And I said, well, I can't pack heavy, but if I eat one of those, it's like eating a meal. So I throw my little Slim Fast bars in the bag. Then I went and found a broomstick, got my little Walmart bag and put that on the stick, and I said goodbye. And I threw it on my shoulders, and I walked out the house. And I just remember walking and walking and walking what felt like forever. In reality, it was probably only like 15 minutes, right? At about the 15-minute mark, we'll say, it hit me, what am I doing? Where am I going? Who will receive me? What do I own? Slim Fast bars. That's all I have to my name at this moment. I said, this is crazy. This is insane. I'm going to get lost. Eventually I won't even know how to get back home, even if I wanted to. And, it's a little cloudy out. It looks like it might rain, and the Slim Fast bars won't protect me from that. And I just didn't think it through. But then the doubt started to come in. I was like, well, I know by this point I've thoroughly offended my parents. I can't go back. I'm too far gone, right? I can't go back. I really, really, really messed up this time. And so, as I sat there with my thoughts, I did nothing for a while. I just stood there with my little bag, my stick, and just pondered, worried about my future. And so this morning, turn with me, we're going to be looking at a short book of the Bible, maybe one that as you're flipping through really fast to get to Matthew or Mark, Luke or John or something, you might pass over. We're going to be in the book of Joel. It is right next to Hosea. Hosea is a pretty popular one. You might know where that one is. Hosea and then Joel. So we're going to start with Joel. We're going to be in Joel chapter 1. And it begins this way: the word of the Lord that came to Joel, the son of Pethuel. Right, okay, so verse 2 goes like this. Verse 2 says, "Hear this, you elders, give ear, all inhabitants of the land. Has such a thing happened in your days or in the days of your fathers? Tell your children of it, and let your children tell their children, and their children to another generation. What the cutting locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust left, the hopping locust has eaten. What the hopping locust left, the destroying locust has eaten. Right off the bat, Joel wastes zero time. He says, you guys are in trouble. There is a plague coming upon you. Locusts like you have never, ever, ever seen before. They're coming. And there may have been people who would look at this and say, well, these things happen all the time, right? Because in the same way that we have become accustomed to hurricanes, right? The rest of the world, CNN, Fox News, whatever they're reporting on, it's like, it's the end of the world. Oh my goodness, a Category 3, 4 hurricane is coming, and you see all the Floridians just hanging out, right? They're hanging out until it gets to that Category 5. Then we might, go get some canned food or something. But up until that point, we're fine with it. These things happen all the time. And then in the ancient Near East, they're looking at this and might be wondering, locusts come all the time. It was in season. And what would happen, the locusts, all of their eggs would hatch, they breed, eggs hatch, and they can multiply like crazy. The saying is, oh, they multiply like rabbits. No, they multiply like locusts, really. Boom, millions and millions and millions of locusts would descend on communities every year. Some were worse than others, right? You got a Category 1 locust or a Category 5. This was a Category 10, to put it into perspective. Joel is saying, you don't understand. Nothing like you have ever seen before. These locusts will destroy everything. In Joel chapter 1, verse 7, speaking of the locust, he even says this, it, the locust, has laid waste my vine and splintered my fig tree. It has stripped off their bark and thrown it down. Their branches were made white. Why does he point this out? There's two reasons. Number one, a very practical reason, is that locusts do not like vines. They don't like to eat them, and they don't like fig trees. This is the Brussels sprouts, right, of the locust palate. They look at those and they say, oh, if I have to, right? So a lot of times what would happen, a Category 1 or 2 locusts, right, they'd come in, they'd eat everything, but they'd say, I'm good. I don't need that. I don't need the figs. I don't need the vines. I'll pass. But as you start getting higher and higher and higher, in the intensity of the locusts, the locusts, they're picky, but they're not going to say no to a meal. They will eat everything. So very practical, right? He's saying this is the kind of locust storm that will devour everything in your path. Why is this important? Well, they didn't have money and banks and things the way that we do now. The economy of a nation was very much tied to the agriculture. What could we produce? If the locusts eat everything, we're bankrupt. We have nothing. People will starve. People will move away. People will die. There's also a spiritual aspect to this, right? Something maybe not super spiritual, but it's like a play on words, right? So, the vine and the fig tree, that saying symbolizes something. It symbolizes a sense of security and prosperity, right? So, to put it into perspective, maybe talk about it here in today's day and age, right? We might say that someone lived a really good life. They lived a successful life when they can kick back in a rocking chair on their nice wraparound porch, looking out on their land with a lemonade in their hand, saying, I am at peace, right? I've done what I needed to do, right? The ancient Near East version of this, was to sit under one's own vine and fig tree You lived a real good life if you could kick back under your vines and your fig trees, right? We see an example of this in 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 25. You can turn there if you want, or you can just trust me, I guess. Turn there. And Judah, 1 Kings 4, verse 25, and Judah and Israel lived in safety from Dan even to Beersheba, every man under his vine, there it is, and under his fig tree, all the days of Solomon. You lived a nice and peaceful life if you had those two things. But here we see Joel is saying, guys, they're going to eat everything. You will not have peace. You will not have security. This is a bad thing coming. And they're coming. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're on their way. The locusts are coming. Why? So, Joel, why are you telling us this? Why is this happening? Well, it's because you're under judgment at this time. Judah, I hate to tell you, but you're under judgment at this. It's like a train coming. You can't move out of the way. You did not act right. It is coming for you now. And they might be saying to themselves, well, we have been living under our vines and our fig trees for a while. What could we possibly have been doing wrong? So to talk about that, to answer that question, we're going to look into some of the context into the time that Joel lived, all right? If you want to just bear with me a bit in a little history lesson, Joel prophesied during the reign of King Uzziah, okay? And Uzziah was a pretty successful king by all merits of the word, right? Outwardly, he presented himself real well. Under his reign, Uzziah, he increased the territory of the nation. He was winning wars left and right, forming alliances that were crucial. He was developing the city, modernizing it, restoring things that were broken, building the cities back to their glory. And in all of this, right, you bring in economic prosperity. People are living under the vine and the fig trees. It is a good thing to live in this time with this king. We're hanging out, Joel. What is going on? What could possibly be the problem? And so Joel is expressing to them, that's the problem. That right there is the center of what is wrong. Because outwardly, our nation is doing well. However, spiritually, we are inactive. So again, King Uzziah, great king outwardly, right? But spiritually, he had an issue with pride. He had an issue with pride. 2 Chronicles 26, it details this story, and it details it pretty well, I think, the problem that he is facing, right? It begins by listing all the great things that he's done, like I just said, increasing the territory, winning wars, alliances, all those good things. And it says that things were nice. Then it goes into the second half of this chapter, and it details an issue with his pride, right? What happened is he decided, one day, I'm going to just go and burn incense in the altar myself. To us, that might not sound like such a bad thing. However, this was a process clearly instructed by God that only the priests should do this. They are set apart for that special work. It doesn't matter who you are. If you are not a priest, do not do these things, right? But the king says, well, but that's for the people who don't do as great a thing as I do. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, right? And so he enters in, and it catches the attention of not one or two priests, but 80 priests. 80 priests show up, and it says that they try to stand in his way. And they're upset about it. You can't do this. Just because you're great in this area does not mean you have the authority to do this other thing. It's a stay in your lane conversation, right? Well, he's not necessarily happy about it. And it says that he gets angry. Instead of approaching the situation with humility and repentance and saying, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. He gets angry. And he is struck that day with leprosy until the day he dies. Spiritually, if the leader is weak, it begins to rub off on the people, right? They follow the leader. We might say, I'm a free thinker and I do what I want, and you might be to a degree, but at some level, we need to acknowledge that we are influenced by the people we look up to, right? And so, what they had to look forward to as a nation was this guy who says, well, I do what I want because I do good things, right? And also, I am in need of what? I am in need of what? Everything I could possibly want is right here. You start to get a little, I guess a lack of a better word, we begin to get a little lazy. They begin to get a little lazy. As I read this, as I'm studying this, what stuck out into my mind was a video of mine, not of mine, but a video that I watched scrolling through some social media, right? And you see this video and it's explaining that this man, he's walking into a store. He just arrived in the States from Cuba. And he walks into this grocery store and begins to weep uncontrollably. Why? As you listen to the video, he starts to explain, I've never seen this much food in my life. I've never seen this much prosperity in my life. He begins to also say, I wish I could just take a portion of this back home to the people I left behind. And I watched this video and I start to say to myself, there's a Publix on every street. Which, by the way, while Raquel and I lived in Michigan, we missed Publix. I'm so glad to be back. But there is a Publix. If not a Publix, there's an Aldi's. If not an Aldi's, there's a Walmart. If not a Walmart, there is a lot of things here. We live, and this is not to be political, but we live under the vine and the fig, right? We live pretty good here. Despite the things that are going on in the world, that are going on in America, we live pretty well here. And so as I'm reading this, I begin to worry about myself, about us. And I say, oh no, could it be that we find ourselves unknowingly in a similar situation to the people of Judah, to the people that Joel is saying, I need you guys to understand that when the bad times come, you will not be prepared. Not just physically, spiritually, we will not be prepared. Because when we forget how blessed we are, when it becomes normal, when it becomes the mundane, what happens is the need for God becomes a second thought. Always. To just speak as plainly and as transparently as I can with you all, I have experienced in my own life, right? There's an understanding that like pastors, spiritual leaders, chaplains, teachers, whatever, are always firing at 100%. Always, all the time. We're like the understanding is that we are supposed to. And we should, right? We should. And I'll be honest, when I first came here, when I first worked with small groups while I was at Southern, while I first worked at the dorm while I was at Andrews, all spiritual jobs, if you will. At first, it's a little unnerving. You need to fully rely because you say, God, I have no idea what I'm doing. But as you get through your first meeting, right? You get through the second meeting and the third and the fourth, and you start to say, okay, I'm recognizing the pattern here. It's comfortable. I feel the vines and the fig trees here. It's peaceful. When we forget how important it is that all good things come from God, He becomes a second thought every time. We read about prophecies, Hosea, Joel, Amos. All of these guys are saying the same thing. You guys don't recognize that you're putting Him second. And when you pull away, when you leave the presence of God, things tend to happen that you are not prepared for. And so in Joel 1, verse 5, Joel says this, "Awake, you drunkards, and weep and wail, all you drinkers of wine, because of the sweet wine, for it is cut off from your mouth." Wake up! You are so comfortable. Judea, you are so comfortable, you don't even know. You don't know. You do not know that you have become separated. He likens it to that of being drunk. You are inebriated off of your comfort. You're not seeing properly. You are happy for no reason, right? You are happy because of physical things that give you pleasure, but you are not of sober mind. The happiness you feel is a facade. In your altered state of mind, sure, we're gonna stick with this analogy. With your altered state of mind, you are making choices that are not right. Wake up, Judea. He continues on in verse 8, and he explains to them, this is what you should be like. Actually, if you really take a look at how you are, in verse 8, he says, "Lament like a virgin wearing sackcloth for the bridegroom of her youth." People reading this at the time would have understood exactly what this was. There were times, right, things happen in life where a man and a woman were promised to be married, they're engaged, but before the wedding took place, the groom would die. Maybe he went off to war, maybe he got sick, things happen. That's still sad today. But in this time, it was sad for a multiplicity of reasons because, and we're not going to get into all of that, but women needed, right? It helped them in society if they were married, so they were sad because they lost someone they loved. They were sad because things just got a lot harder, right? Verse 8, he's explaining, you are happy, but I need you to A, wake up, and B, recognize the state that you are in. You are separated from someone who loves you very, very much. You are not prepared for what is coming. Because if you were paying attention, you'd know to be sad at this very moment. We're going to jump over now to chapter 2. Verse 1, it says, it talks about here in verse, where did it go? Verse 1. "Blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is near." The day of the Lord is coming. Verse 6. Verse 6 says this. We're going to go from 6 to 11. It says, "Before them, peoples are in anguish." So this can be a little confusing, so I'm going to just let you know when he's referring to them, right? If you read this entire chapter here, Joel starts saying there is this group like an army coming. He is still referring to the locusts, right? They're coming like an army. And what do armies do? They destroy, they pillage, they kill, right? So, when we hear them or the armies, just in your mind say, oh, he's referring to the locusts. So, verse 6, before them, peoples are in anguish. All faces grow pale. Like warriors they charge. Like soldiers they scale the wall. They march each on his way. They do not swerve from their path. They do not jostle one another. Each marches in his path. They burst through the weapons and are not halted. They leap upon the city. They run upon the walls. They climb up into houses. They enter through windows like a thief. The earth quakes before them. The heavens tremble. The sun and moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. The Lord utters his voice before his army. For his camp is exceedingly great. He who executes his word is powerful. For the day of the Lord is great and very awesome. Who can endure it? The day of the Lord. This is something that's been mentioned a few times now. The day of the Lord was a misconception among many people of Israel at this time, right? The day of the Lord is equivalent to judgment. And they were all on board for that because they assumed judgment for everyone else, but not us, right? We got it good here. Everybody else is going to get smacked around but us. However, Hosea, Joel, Amos are screaming at them, you're wrong. You're included. You are not exempt from this judgment. In fact, it's coming for you. Right now, it's coming for you. So people reading this, hearing this, they're like, oh, well, the Lord utters his voice before his armies. Well, good thing he's talking to our armies. Joel says, no, he is talking to the locusts. I need you to understand, the locusts are his armies right now. He will judge you. This is happening, guys. It's going to happen, okay? And the thing is, Joel's saying, we deserve it. We do. We've not been doing the right thing. We deserve it. And so people are saying, those who do listen are saying, okay, all right, Joel, well, I am awake now. You have my attention. And like them, right, I imagine in myself, right, as I begin to wake up from my own stupor, if you will, and I begin to realize and dwell on, oh my goodness, I dropped the ball here and here and here and here and here, and that was just Tuesday, right? When I begin to think, oh no, I have messed up. I deserve this. Look at the things I've done wrong. We can enter into a place where we begin to think, and maybe they thought the same thing, well, if the locusts are coming, and if I deserve it, then what's the point of doing anything different? I'm nervous now. If you're telling me there's nothing I can do to get out of the way, then what's the point of even trying? Friends, I'd like to just deposit this, right? And Joel even says it in response. We're going to look at that verse right now. But we have an opportunity to change, to do better, to make a right decision because of mercy, which flows freely for you and for me and for them out there and for them over there, for everyone. Because in verse 12, so we just read verse 11, where it's so great, the day of the Lord, it's coming. Who can endure it? Verse 12 begins by saying this, yet even now, even at this very moment, the locusts are outside. At this moment where it feels hopeless, like you're just a big bag of sin and you've messed up so much, now, at this moment, even now, declares the Lord, not Joel, now declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Yes, it's coming. Yeah, we also deserve it. But even though that is true, this is also true. It says that he is gracious, that he is merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, relents over disaster. Don't believe me? It's right here in verse 13. He's saying, rend your hearts, right? People, when they were sad, they would tear their clothes. Don't even worry about tearing your clothing. Worry about the heart. The heart is what needs change. Rend your hearts, not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. He relents over this disaster. He wants you here. He wants you well. He wants you safe. He loves us so much. And so, if I live in Judea and I'm reading this or I'm hearing this, my next question is how? How can I return to God? And Joel says, oh, don't you worry, because right here it says, verse 15, blow the trumpet in Zion, consecrate a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the people, consecrate the congregations, assemble the elders, gather the children, even the nursing infants. Let the bridegroom leave his room and the bride her chamber. Between the vestibule and the altar, let the priests, the ministers of the Lord, weep and say, spare your people, O Lord, and make not your heritage a reproach, a byword among the nations. Why should they say among the peoples, where is their God? How do we return to God? Simply ask. Ask. And then trust. Right? So let's talk about this a little bit. It's simple, right? Ask and you shall what? Receive. Right? Of all this, right? Like Joel has spent a chapter and a half talking about all the things that are coming. And what do we need to do in response? One thing. Ask. Oh Lord, spare your people. Make not your heritage a reproach. We don't want to be a laughingstock, God. We are sorry. Forgive us. Right? And then trust, right? Because no amount of doing good, we call them works, right? No amount of works will ever save you, right? Changing your habits, right? Those all sound like the right things, right? But it's about the perspective of our mind, right? If I say, oh man, the judgment is coming, right? This thing that sounds very scary is coming. So what I'm going to do, out of my own willpower, I'm just going to stop doing bad things. I won't do them anymore. If we rely on our willpower, right? If we rely on our power, it's not sustainable. We rely on our power, we then say, your grace is not enough. What God is saying, verse 12, even now, declares the Lord. This is coming from him. Return to me. He didn't say, try really, really hard to stop sinning. He said, return to me. Rely on my grace. I am all these things. I am gracious, slow to anger. Trust that what I'm saying is true. You're very ready to believe that the judgment is coming. Be even more ready to believe this, that I am these things for you. On our own, it is not sustainable. It's not even possible. We are being asked to trust in His grace and believe that His grace is enough. To do it on our own is then really just to be scared. We're just scared at that point. We're changing things because we don't want to, we don't want the locust to eat everything, right? But to return to Him is to return to a relationship. To return to Him is just to say, I want you close. And the closer you are to Him, the farther away the locusts are. It also says something else, right? And it doesn't necessarily say this implicitly, but it's something that I thought bears talking about, right? Blow the trumpet in Zion, consecrate a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the people, consecrate the congregation, assemble the elders, the children, the infants. Let the bridegroom and the bride come as well. We should be doing this together. Together, right? As a church, right? We should be trusting, we should be returning together. They did not come, right? It makes no mention that they came and they said, okay, we're going to come over here and we're going to say, so I'm on this half of the church right now, and we're all going to come and say, God, protect us from those ones over here. And these didn't say either, God, I don't know what they're doing over there, but protect us from them. No, they came together as a unified body. They came together as a unified body to repent for their sins. As a group, your sin is my sin. If I don't do any, if we are collectively okay with that, that's on us. So we need to come together, right? It doesn't say anything here about only the young came and prayed, fix the old people. It didn't say that the old came and said, fix the young people. I don't know what Gen Z's doing. It said nothing about liberals only or conservatives only. It was their failure. It was their failure. This was not a time to see who had messed up more or who had messed up less, because the locusts were coming all the same. And also, when it's always someone else's fault, you don't really have to change a thing, right? If you can justify, well, it's them, and I'm cool, and I'm doing A-okay. If it's always someone else's fault, what do you have to be worried about? The locusts are still coming. To believe it's always someone else is not right. We are a group, we are a church, we are a family. We are all children of God. It hurts, man. It hurts to watch the news, to see things and people hating each other. Social media, we need to all get off social media for a week, and we need to just, right? It's hard to see some of this stuff because we're all family, right? Even people we disagree with vehemently are still children of God. He died for them the same. Because we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So we should ask. We should come together. This is not a time to separate and fight each other. And in so doing, we see in chapter 2, verse 18, that the Lord responds. God responds. He says in verse 18 and 19, "Then the Lord became jealous for his land. He had pity on the people. And the Lord answered and said to his people, 'Behold, I am sending to you grain, wine, and oil, and you will be satisfied. And I will no more make you a reproach among the nations.'" Verse 21 says this, "Fear not, O land, be glad and rejoice, for the Lord has done great things. Fear not, you beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness are green, and the tree bears its fruit. The fig tree and the vine give their full yield." That sounds familiar. "Be glad, O children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given the early rain for your vindication, and he has poured down for you abundant rain, the early and the latter rain as before." Return to God. Verse 24, "And he will store, and your storehouses will overflow." Return to God. Verse 25, "And he will restore." Verse 26, return to God, "You will eat and be satisfied." Return to God. Verse 27, you will never be put to shame again. And he will be in the midst of his people. I want to make he never left, right? Let's talk about, he never left, right? We left. So when we return to God, where is he now? In the midst. He stays the same. We go astray. We run away. Return to God. He will be in the midst. It says that there are none like him. There are none like him. And if that wasn't enough, right? So people are saying, okay, we sinned, but there is mercy. And Joel says, I have one better for you. There is also hope. Hope for the future, right? The locusts, that's something that's coming, right? The day of the Lord, your judgment, it's on its way. However, there is another day of the Lord. The final judgment, an end-time judgment. I can't speak this morning. An end-time judgment, right, is coming. There is hope, right? Verse 1, chapter 3 says this, chapter 3, verse 1, "For behold, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my heritage Israel, because they have scattered them among the nations and have divided up my land." A judgment is coming. There has to be a judgment. Otherwise, sin will continue to ruin your life. Without judgment, without a cleansing, we will never, ever, ever move forward. We will never be saved. We will always just be, in this state of what's going to happen next. Wouldn't it be nice? Would it be nice if there was some place, someday, that we could all look forward to, where everyone we've lost will be with us again, where everyone who's sick will stop being sick, where we won't have to worry every time we leave the house, where our friends will stay our friends, where our family will not turn their back on us? Wouldn't it be nice? There is a place. And before we get there, there has to be a judgment. The day of the Lord is coming. It's an awesome day. And it's coming. And Joel in chapter 3 breaks it down that you're going to be okay if you continue to stay in the midst of God. You will be fine. You will be okay. You will be saved forever. Full stop. You don't have to worry about another thing ever again. And it's all because, and it all starts with mercy. We get to practice now. We get to practice now drawing close to God. As things feel, as God continues to be pushed to the side, may this be a reminder, like Joel, to wake up. Find where it is you put God and bring him back. Return to him. Because that is the best thing you could ever do. And so, as I was standing in the middle of the street, my Walmart bag, my broomstick, I worried, where can I go? My parents didn't leave. I left. I walked away, and in so doing, I was terrified that I had offended them to the point of no return. That if I walked back into the house, they would say, "You don't live here," and send me right back out. I had already eaten one Slim Fast bar. What was I going to do? And yet, as I continued to think, I said, there are some pretty bad things out here. Like I said, the storm's coming in. There are strangers. I don't know them. I once saw a dog jump over that fence, and I'm looking pretty tasty today, I think. So there are bad things out here, okay? Right? Had I stayed away, and let's say this is a world where the police wouldn't have come and found me, right? Let's say if I had stayed out there, my likelihood of survival was very slim. It would have just been me and zero life experience too. And so I decided I will go back home and I will see what awaits me. So I did one of these, and I turned around, and I walked 15 minutes back home, and I knocked on the door, and my mom was there, and she knew I was acting up, She had a look on her face, and I was like, oh, here it comes. Here it comes. And she did one of these as she was standing in front of the door, and then she let me in. Because why? Because she loves me. Because despite, and I realize that I'm always telling stories about my mom that sound like she was mean. She's not. She loves me. She was slow to anger. She had mercy on me because I was the one who was wrong. She welcomed me back in. And inside the protection of my house, as I was in the midst of my parents, all of the dangers outside became so minuscule. They were still there, right? They're still all out there. The storm was still coming. The dog was still jumping over the fence. All of those things were still there. But inside, in the midst, in the protection of my home with my mother and my father, I was safe. Joel 2:28 says this, and we'll close with this. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. Even on the male and female servants. In those days I will pour out my Spirit. You're protected. God's presence is going to be with you. He will pour out his Spirit on us. It happened at Pentecost, and it is still open for us today. We just need to ask. And then in verse 32, and it shall come to pass that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. That's the promise. That's the promise. No matter how far you run away, you see the locusts are coming. When you run back to the Father, when you turn your eyes back towards him and you go back in that direction and you come home and he's willing and ready to let you back in always, you are safe inside. All of us who call on the name of the Lord will be saved. Full stop. Let's pray. Kind and Heavenly Father, God, thank you. Thank you for being a God who warns us. You warn us when we start to get too far away, when destruction is right around the corner. You pull us back. You tug on our heartstrings. You call out to us and say, I miss you and I need you back. God, I pray that when you call on us, we would listen. God, that people are here today. Maybe they didn't want to be here today. Maybe they haven't been here in a really long time. They haven't spoken to you in a long time. God, you are tugging on their heartstrings. God, may your Holy Spirit be poured out on us today, that we may have the courage to turn around and come back to you. God, thank you for being a God who always has the door open, who always is extending your arms out, ready to embrace us. God, I pray that we would honor the grace, the mercy, the sacrifice that you've given us all. God, I pray for my friends, my family here, Lord, that you would pour out a blessing, that you would pour out your Spirit on us, that we may be the blessing for someone else. In your name, amen.